All right, I want to begin by creating and designing apps, but I think we need to go over some of the very basics of Photoshop, and I fought doing this for a very long time, but we're just going to go over how to set up our workspace really quickly, some stuff about documents, and then go over the tools incredibly quickly, and we're going to do all this under 20 minutes, and then we're going to dive straight into designing our very first app. So if you get a little bit confused, if I'm going fast, if things don't quite make sense, keep in mind that everything that you learn in the next 20 minutes about Photoshop will be reiterated over and over and over again. You'll see it multiple times. So don't worry about it. You don't need to know it yet. I just want to introduce you guys, show you guys around a little bit, and make sure not everything is foreign while we're learning it. But we are going to be doing a lot of what I call learning by doing, where we learn how to use all these tools that I'm about to show you while we build user interface for our applications. Alright, I want you guys to go ahead and open up Adobe Photoshop. I am using Adobe Photoshop CC or Creative Cloud. If you're using an older version, don't worry, that's fine. They're all pretty much the same, very similar, and there shouldn't be any problems, especially for what we're going to be doing. Now, the first thing I want you to do to set up our workspace is come up to Window. Let's make sure that we're on Photoshop, and we'll come up to Window and go to Workspace, and let's make sure that we're on Typography. And you can also do this by coming over here and selecting Typography. We're going to be working in this workspace throughout the entire course. Now, along the left side here, you have all your tools, and this is what's called the toolbar. And we can go ahead, and we're not going to be using all of these. And I want to clarify right now that we're going to be throwing a lot of stuff out the window. We're not fixing blemishes in models' faces. We're not bringing out the sunlight in a sunset of an image we took in the Bahamas. This is user interface design. We're creating elements in beautiful user interface. We're not working with photographs. We're not animating, we're not drawing cartoons. This is strictly for designing apps, or all of this applies to designing anything. So you could design websites or design tablet interface. It doesn't matter, but just know that this is user interface. So we're not going to be using a lot of filters. We're not going to be doing a lot of stuff like that. So let's go through a couple of these tools, especially the ones we're going to be using a lot. And the first one you see is your Move tool. Let's just start by creating a new document, and just give it a width of 1000 by 1000. I'm just going to name this Explore because we are exploring Photoshop. Now our Move tool is going to allow us to move anything around, and it's somewhat important that I explain layers. And if you come down here in the bottom right, you'll see layers, channels, and paths. We're always going to be using layers in this course. We're not getting into any channels or path stuff. And to understand layers, we can quickly understand them by drawing. So I want you to come over here and grab your rounded rectangle tool. Now on the toolbar, all of these slots have multiple tools, at least most of them do. So if I were to come down here to my tool section in the toolbar, I could hold down and then find the shape that I want. I want the rectangle tool, and I just want to show you this because I want to show you how layers work. So we're just going to drag this out here, and that's going to draw a shape. Now, if we were to drag again, it's going to create a new shape. And this first one's called Rectangle 1, and the second one, Rectangle 2. And I'm going to change the color of Rectangle 2 really quickly. And we're going to be changing colors of layers a lot in this course by coming over here, and we can make sure that this layer is selected. And we're going to double click right over here on the right side, and it's going to bring up these layer styles. And from there we can do a lot of different things, but if we come down here to color overlay, we can just change this color. And I'm just going to select this and come up here and select the color, and I'm just going to drag it to a random color. It really doesn't matter. This blue is fine. So layers work like this. If I were to drag this rectangle 2 over this rectangle 1, and I'm going to do that by using the Move tool up here, and this is the first tool that we'll learn about, is the Move tool. With this layer selected, I can move things around with my Move tool. And because this rectangle 2 layer is above layer 1, it's going to be on top of it. And I just want you to understand sort of how layers work and how they literally mean layers, one on top of the other, and visibility becomes an issue when you're working with layers. So if I were to take rectangle 1, and we can move layers by just grabbing them here and dragging them around. If I were to drag this above rectangle 2, then it would be above it. So that's kind of explains how layers work in a very quick manner. Now, let's go look at our rectangle marquee tool, and this simply allows us to draw a rectangle, and we're not drawing a shape, we're drawing a rectangle, and we're going to be able to grab selections. And we use these to select things, and you'll notice it creates what we designers like to call these marching ants around like different sections. So we can, draw circles with this, and let me Control or Command D will always get rid of a selection. So you see we have this little like square with a circle cut out. If we hit Control or Command D if you're on a Mac, it's going to deselect that, and we can use this to select. Maybe we want an oval, so we can draw an oval. And because we're on rectangle 1, we're gonna select delete or something. I just wanted to show y'all what the tools are. Now, we're not going to be using any of the lasso tools really in this course, but we will be using the magic wand tool and the quick selection tool. And essentially, these are ways to get color. So if we were to use the magic wand tool and I wanted to get this entire gray section, one second, and I wanted to get this entire gray section, I could use my magic wand tool. And I'm going to come up to Layer, Rasterize, Shape, and don't worry about what that is. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I can use my magic wand tool to grab all this gray, and it's just going to select it. So let's draw another shape really quickly, and I'm just going to draw a circle with my ellipse tool, and I'm just going to drag it out. Whoops. And I'm going to create a new layer first and call it Circle. And I'm just going to drag this out, and then let's double click it, change the color, and we'll just keep that dark color. So now I'm going to rasterize this shape as well really quickly, and once again, don't worry about that. So if I wanted to get this darker color and get just this selection, I could use my magic wand tool. And a lot of people use the magic wand tool or this quick selection tool, the one next to it, to remove backgrounds from images. Maybe you want to cut a picture of something out and remove the background. Well, you can grab the color of the background with one of these tools and then delete that content. Let's keep going. We're not going to be using the crop tool. Here you have the eyedropper tool, and out of all these tools, it's really the only one we're going to use. And the eyedropper tool is pretty handy. If I wanted to get the color of something, or if I pasted a picture in and I wanted to get a specific color, I can just hover over the color and click it, and it's going to give me that blue right there. And then, if I need to get the hexadecimal color, I can just come in here and copy it. If I want this gray, boom, there's that gray. Pretty cool. We're not going to be using any of the spot healing brush or any of this or any of these because we're not really working with photographs. We could use this type of stuff to remove red eyes from images. And we have our brush tool, obviously, and I have this set to 1 pixel, but obviously this is just a brush. We can draw with it, we can brush with it. We're not going to really use this. We don't really have a need for it in this course. And I'm just going to hit Control or Command Z to undo that brush. Won't be using the stamp. Here we have our eraser tool, and you can guess what this does. It simply erases. Now you'll notice when I use the eraser up here, it doesn't do anything, but when I come over the circle, it erases. Well, that's because I have the circle layer selected. If I were to select this rectangle 1 layer, the gray layer here, and then use my eraser, well, I would then be able to erase it. So once again, you have to consider which layer you're using and when. Now let's go back up here and use our rectangular marquee tool. I could draw this. Maybe I want a long, thin rectangle. I'm going to draw it with my rectangular marquee tool, and a lot of times in this course we'll come up here we'll create a new layer, and I'll call this long, thin rectangle. Okay, and then so I have my layer, and I'm on my layer down here in the bottom right. Now I can use the paint bucket tool, or this fill tool, and I can fill it with whatever color I have here on top. And this is what's called the foreground color, and the one behind it is what's called the background color. So we can switch between these by selecting here, and I'm just going to click my foreground color, and I'm going to grab a red, and it doesn't really matter, and I'm just going to show you by, so now I'm going to fill this little rectangle that we drew with our rectangular marquee tool with a red color, and it's going to create this long triangle, and we now have a layer. So you can imagine if we hid this, it would disappear. And then whenever you have these marching ants around a section, you want to get rid of them, Command or Control D to deselect it. And you can also come up here and go to deselect. Now we're not going to be using any blurring really, or sharpening, or smudging. And the next tool that we're going to use quite often is the pen tool. And we're just going to use this to quickly draw things. And I'm going to show you how really quickly. Let's zoom in. And you can zoom in by coming down here and changing the percentage. Type in 200%. You can also use the magnifying glass down here. Or you can do what I like to do, and is hold Control plus or Command plus. So Control plus will zoom in a little bit. And we're going to use this little pen tool. And once again, let's create a new layer. We're going to get used to creating new layers for creating different elements and different objects. And we're just going to call this pen drawing. And let's just create a point by clicking. And then we can create another point by clicking. And then we can create, another point by clicking. All right, so we have 3 points here. We always have to make sure we come back to the original point and finish the shape. And you'll notice, and let's zoom in a little bit further, and you'll notice that when I hover around here and click, it'll make a point. But when I go back to the original point, you'll see a little circle will appear. There's that little circle. I know that when I select this now that it's going to close this off and finish it. So we've drawn this shape. Now, in order to fill it with a color or do anything with it, and this is how we're going to do this 100% of the time in this course, let's go ahead and with our pen tool inside, right click, select make selection, make sure always that the feather radius is 0 pixels or anti-aliased, and we have new selection selected, and it's just going to create this shape, and we're going to get those marching ants. And because we created a new layer called pen drawing, we could go ahead and fill this with that red color, and we just drew that shape, which is great. Now we've gone through the pen tool. Obviously, another one we're going to use a ton is our horizontal type tool, because we are doing user interface and there's always a lot of text. So we can obviously just drag that out, like any other text tool. Type something, hello world. We can't really see it because the font's so small, and all our font stuff is going to be up here. We can change the font here, change the weight over here, the size, the space between each sentence, and then the space between each letter. We have a ton of different options. We can center it. We can left indent, right indent, whatever we want. Let's make this a lot bigger. I'm going to change it to 60, and then look, we can grab our drag tool and just drag it around, because that's what the drag tool does. So we've gone through the text tool. We're not going to really be using the path selection tool, but we will be using the shape tool, and we just went over this. We've drawn rectangles. We can also draw rounded rectangles, and I'm just going to draw one really quickly. And you can see there's a really round rectangle. That's because the radius up here at the top is set to 100 pixels. If we did something like 5 pixels, or even 10 pixels, it looks something like this, a lot more modest of a rounded rectangle. And then we just have this hand tool, which essentially can just grab stuff or rotate stuff, and then, the zoom tool to zoom in and out. Now that is a basic run through of our tools, and that is very basic, but don't worry if that seems fast or if you don't understand anything. Throughout this entire course, I will go over how to use a tool, when we use it. So I'm going to tell you why we're using it or how to use it while we're using it. So as opposed to going into all this stuff really deep, I want to just get going, start creating apps, and tell you why we're using a certain tool and how to use that tool while we're doing it. I find that that is the very best way to learn, and that it's going to be the most useful, for us as we go through this course. So we've learned our tools. We know how to set this up. I just want to do one more thing. Go up to to Window. I want to make sure that you have all the same stuff selected as I do. And let's just check. Typography is selected. Good. And that's pretty much it as far as going over the tools. Let's do this really quickly. If you come over here, we can look through a bunch of stuff. We won't really be using any of this, but we can, create swatches or styles, and we can look at our paint brushes over here. And we have a lot of, quick ways to get the stuff over here. And I'm just remembered, let's go over really quickly gradients, because gradient is something that we will use. And this is your gradient tool. And I'm just going to delete everything we've done this far. So I'm going to grab the very top layer, this circle, and I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom layer, the rectangle too. And if you do this and hold shift and select the bottom one, it's going to select all of those layers in between. And I'm going to right click, and of course it's not going to let me delete them, so I'm going to right click and see if I can, let's just delete these one at a time by selecting delete. Okay, and let's just really quickly, I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool and select the entire square. And we're just going to see really quickly how a gradient works. So let's create a new layer, and we'll call this gradient. Okay, and so what we can do is we can grab our gradient tool, and up here is where our gradient is. And if we click it, it's going to pull up our gradient editor. And you can grab some pre-selected ones. You can download a lot of gradients, especially the ones that iOS gradients that you see a lot, really good ones. So we could do something like that. And this is going to fade from red to green. So if we were to use our gradient tool and drag down, you would get that red to green fade. And that's essentially what a gradient is. It is one color fading into another, or multiple colors fading in certain series into specific colors. So that's a quick introduction to Photoshop. This is meant to be, very concise, not, I don't want to get into too much of it because I kind of just want to jump straight into designing apps. So let's keep moving on.